All right, Andrew Easton with the ESUCC, and I'm grateful to Brady Public Schools for them allowing us to visit with James McGowan and Stephanie Wolf a little bit about the topic of clarity about working with special education students during this time in a remote setting. It is certainly a challenge. It's certainly needs that we want to make sure that we're meeting for those special needs students, and that they are getting the proper accommodations to make sure that they can be successful in that remote environment. And so, James, I'm going to ask, I guess, first, if you would give us a little bit of insight into, in your role as a school leader, what it was like to kind of prepare for these types of scenarios, and what's going on in Brady Public Schools to support our students with special needs.
Obviously, it's tough to prepare for something like this, but I'm very fortunate. I will say that I have very good people around me, a very good staff, and that is step number one. But aside from that, we recognized early that we were financially, we had paid for services with our ESU, and how would that, what would that look like? We knew that chances are, we were not going to get reimbursed if those services were not provided. So how could we make it work? And so what we did, we recognized that if we went online, it was probably about 25% of a normal classroom we could have through Zoom. And some of that expectations were lessened for our K-3 students. And then we told the ESU that, that's what the percentage basically that we were looking at. We also stated that we would be taking grades during any type of a closure. So there was some expectations for the staff and students. And the ESU then, let's say a classroom would meet for 40 minutes, 25% of that, they would provide then 10 minutes of services for kids. So they were still meeting with students, and that expectation was there early on. And it was something that I believe it helped students because they talked about other things. It wasn't necessarily maybe speech that they were discussing, but it did help with students with social and emotional, and having those familiar faces on a screen in a time of need.
Yeah, and that's so important, like as you're saying, in this time, that relationships matter, and that those students feel connected, and that we're trying to help them not only learn but process the present moment, as we all are trying to do that in our own way. And I'd ask Stephanie, what has been your experience in that type of role at this time?
Starting last spring, luckily I had administrators and the ESU personnel who gave the support. They were constantly updating me, giving me what needed to be given, different state mandates that were coming out from the state, and helping figure out that time. I then went ahead and figured out a schedule that worked the best for me. I would not only join the classroom Zooms, but also individual Zooms with every single one of my students. I had 15-minute intervals. If longer, we went longer. But minimum was 15 minutes with them, and I kept to that schedule. That way, it was consistent with the kids, having that consistency, and also with the parents. It helped with the parents. When we left, I did not have as many emails or as I thought I did. I quickly learned that I needed more emails from the parents and updating phone numbers. So I did that, and once we got rolling, I was really surprised at how well it worked once everything was going. Starting this fall, once again, I prepared for possibly going online for different kids. And it has happened. We've had several students who have gone online and who have not been online. And so it's finding that balance of making sure that you are preparing things for those students that have special needs, but also preparing for your students of special needs that are also in the classroom. So a lot of that is one-on-one attention, or making that phone call home to parents asking, what can I do to support you?
Yeah, and what I'm hearing consistently in that is just this need for communication. And on our website that people viewing this are likely accessing this conversation through, there is a whole subsection for communication, but then that piece is also interwoven into a number of other categories because it is critical for the success on a number of fronts. And so with you sharing that, Stephanie, I'd actually turn to James and ask you, what in the area of communication have you maybe systemically tried to implement so that make sure that those lines are there and that the support of these special needs students are being, there's a collaboration that has to happen, right, with at home for this, because parents are in an elevated role in the education process at this moment.
Early on, before we shut down, we did send out a survey to our parents. We were I don't know, a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. We were fortunate to have some foresight to say, hey, this could get bad and we could be faced with a shutdown. So we did survey our parents. The first thing we did was to see what kind of needs there were through technology. And then service providers, we were able to have our parents contact service providers and get internet service, because that's another thing in rural Nebraska. Mm-hmm. Internet service, there is a lag and people don't understand that. And so we have parents that might have 4 kids on at one time, and they are kids with special needs, and they don't have the internet capabilities of doing that. So they're Zooming on a cell phone. They're Zooming through their device, their Chromebooks is what we have at Brady Public Schools. And, we had to see if that was even possible before we could say, hey, we're going online. And we felt that we could do that, but we did have to purchase some stuff. And then service providers, fortunate for us in our area, did hook people up that didn't have that. And, that's communication. It's, linking people with those connections, and businesses were willing to provide that. And without that, it doesn't happen. And then the students with special needs, the parents have to take on a huge role. And I have students that go to Brady Public Schools too that were in my household. And I know for some kids it worked well and others it didn't. And that was the one thing that we tried to recognize was what students did this work for and what students did this not work for. And then, figure out individually, what can we do differently for this individual student to make it better? Because we're a small school, so we are fortunate where we can do that. And some of the students with special needs, they excelled with the remote learning. Others did not. So we tried to, as a staff, we have a pandemic procedure committee, and we did try to talk about that and how could we change things to make it work better. And is it perfect what we're doing? No. Mrs. Wolf mentioned a hybrid where we have some students doing online and going virtual and others in the classroom. And that takes a huge toll on our staff. And so administratively, we have tried to do some things to give them breaks that are unexpected. And, obviously a concern for me as an administrator is how's this going to look in January, February, coming after a holiday break where spirits are pretty high. What's our morale going to be like January, February? And I'm anxious to see how that goes, but I'm cautiously optimistic about that because we've got a long ways to go yet.
Right, and that's something that the resources we're trying to house here, just in one small way, are part of trying to step into that space alongside all educators in this work. And one thing you mentioned there, James, that I'd like to ask Stephanie about is just that parent communication piece, and we referenced it earlier that it is elevated. What are some things that you found in your role, Stephanie, that have been beneficial in your collaboration with parents and supporting parents as they support their students?
I use the Remind app. So that is a way it sends to their phone or email, whichever way the parents set it up, that they can have a text message sent to their phone, which many parents prefer that. But I'm not per se getting their number and they're not getting my number. So it's an easy way I feel it's a safer way for myself as administrator. And then also I made sure to have all their emails. Starting this year, I went through, and if they didn't put their email on the back to school forms, I did make a phone call to ask about, hey, what's a working email that you have? So.
Terrific. And that's the Remind app is actually one that I use. I've used for my kids' sports. I've used it as a coach and a classroom teacher myself. And I do find, like you said, that it's great for communication with parents, because again, you want to be able to access people almost at a moment's notice on their devices, but yeah, I don't always want to have your information out there. James, is there anything kind of last piece of advice from an administrator's lens?
I guess for me, what I found has worked well is less is better. When we overuse our easy messaging system and those types of things, parents tune it out. They don't listen to it anymore. So I try and make everything that we have single page documents, easy to read, that people can hey, what are the highlights of it? Because I'm guilty of it too. When I get a document that's 12 pages from the CDC, I'm not a healthcare expert. How I interpret that is very different. So that's one thing that we have tried to do. And then, Stephanie kind of alluded to some of this stuff. We are fortunate where I don't think our workload is too much with our special education. Our special education teachers, we try and limit the amount of students that they have. I don't want to give specific numbers because I think it might shock people, but that's one thing that I have found out that helps us is having small enough numbers where they can make those personal contacts with parents. And that helped us a lot this year.
Yes, definitely that smaller number of students made it even more of a possibility for me to make sure I was contacting the parents, but yet also, and having that consistency. Once we had a schedule set up, we didn't deviate from that schedule because it was very consistent. And that way parents weren't getting bombarded with emails and other messages because they knew that was going to be the same time every single day or every other day, however I had it set up.
Well, and I'd echo that and say that's kind of the aim of our initiative, is to try to curate resources and streamline that and create content that doesn't necessarily have to live on a page. And so thank you both for using your experience, sharing your experiences, using your voice, and collaborating with us statewide on trying to just learn from one another and be better. We're better together in this work. And so thank you for your sentiments today.
Yeah, and thank you for your work on this. It helps a lot.